Thank you so much for joining. We're going to be getting started on this episode of Final Cut Pro Hub Live in just a minute. Again, thank you so much for joining. This is Final Cut Pro Help Live. It is not the first of the month, but we're going to do it anyway. We missed out at the beginning of this month, but we got some fun, exciting stuff happening the rest of this month. Unlike the actual basketball games, we are going to be continuing with our shortcut bracket.
Thank you so
here
much
on
for
Final
joining.
Cut Pro
This
Help
is Final Cut
with
Pro Help Live.
Let's get rid of that audio. I think you guys had a duplicate audio stream there. But yeah, we're gonna do what we did last year and create a bracket that will show what shortcuts are the most popular and the most used. If you did follow along, we looked for the 2019 shortcut of the year, and what we found after skimming through just about every shortcut that Final Cut Pro has, we found that Command B, as in blade, to create a cut, was the most popular shortcut and took away the title of the 2019 shortcut of the year. So head over to anawesomeguide.com to see the current bracket. We do have the 2020 bracket up there. If you have the link floating around from last year to get the document, we're going to use that exact same link and same document. So you can see the 2019 bracket still in there and see how the shortcuts kind of laid out last time. There's going to be some shifting around probably today and a little bit of tomorrow morning before we go live with the voting, which will happen on Instagram. You can follow us at Final Cut Pro Help and Instagram stories. That's where we'll do all the voting to see which shortcuts you think are the most useful. We'll put one up against another and then, collect those votes. If you don't have an Instagram account, you can still go to instagram.com/FinalCutProHelp to see our account on there. And you can vote on Facebook as well to submit them. But if you, for whatever reason, can't access any of those, that's totally fine. You can still send an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com with your votes. Just tell me what shortcuts you think are the most useful. You don't have to just vote for one. You can put a whole bunch of them, and I'll tally that up as a vote for the shortcut when it comes around to the actual voting to see which ones are most useful. And like maybe many of you out there watching this, I'm out of my actual work, so I have a lot more time to devote to this channel. So I'll probably be doing some more live streaming and demos of these shortcuts, what they do, why you would use them while editing with Final Cut Pro, and kind of dive deeper in as opposed to just doing a very quick overview of what those shortcuts are. So that's the first thing I wanted to talk about today on this live stream is that the shortcut of the year, we are going to be finding out which one is the 2020 shortcut of the year. Right now, we have 64 shortcuts on a bracket that you can see at anawesomeguide.com. And kind of get a preview of what's there. If there's a shortcut that you think should be on there in the top 64 that's not there, send me a message, leave a comment, and we'll get that one added to the list. It might bump another one off, but that's totally fine. That's the idea. We want to find what you're using the most. So with that said, let's get into the next topic, which are just some common importing questions. I've gotten a couple of these, and in order to edit a video with Final Cut Pro, you have to have some content that you actually want to edit. So in most cases, that starts with importing. And there's just 3 questions that I get kind of specifically around importing that I wanted to cover. You can find other videos on this channel about importing. And if you have a question that I haven't answered here, if you're watching live, put it in the chat. If you're watching a replay, don't hesitate. You can still leave a comment or send me a message. And the first question I have that I get a lot is, where do the clips actually go? When you import something, where do they go? So this is the Final Cut Pro interface, and at the top left corner, next to the 3 window buttons that are red, yellow, and green here, there's a little down arrow. That icon is how you import or bring stuff into Final Cut. I know this may sound very basic to some of you if you've been using it for a while, but I just want to point that out. If you hold your mouse, you might get the tooltip as well. The shortcut is Command-I. I am a huge supporter of shortcuts. It's a great way to speed up your workflow and just make editing a whole lot easier. So instead of clicking this button, just use the Command-I on the keyboard. Just hold that Command key down and press the letter I, and you'll get this window, which is our import window. It may look slightly different to you depending on how your system is configured, but you should see 3 areas. There's this column on the left side, an area in the middle, and then another column on the right area that all have important information in them, and it's completely normal, especially if you're newer, to be a little bit overwhelmed, especially with those options on the right side. Many people that have been editing for a long time don't know what half of those things are, or even more, so that's completely okay, and you don't really need all of these options, but it is a good idea to understand why they're there. So we're going to point out a couple things here that are going to answer these questions. So the first one was being, where do your clips actually go? So I have on the desktop a clip that I'm going to use to import and kind of demo this. So on the left column, I'm going to select the desktop as one of my favorite destinations. I have this mono.mov clip, which is actually just a 7-second clip of some fireworks going off. And you can see in this middle area, I'm just skimming across the clip to preview it. At the bottom, I have it selected. Bottom center, it says 1 of 1 selected. These are things that you want to keep an eye out. There's information that's being provided to you for a reason, but this just lets us know what I've selected, which is that 1 clip. And then where does it actually go? Well, it's letting us know on the right side where it's going. And at the top, we're going to be importing it into an existing event. And it says here it's going to copy it to the library. So where is this clip going? Well, every clip and every piece of media, whether it be music, sound effects, video clips, still images, all of this content and media that you import into Final Cut, it has to go somewhere on your computer. But it's not like it's just like, okay, I'm going to save this clip on the desktop. It's actually going to put it somewhere. So it's going to go first into an event. And you can just kind of go top down on this import window. And you have to, you can't skip this step. The clip has to go into an event. So everything you do inside of Final Cut kind of revolves around these events as a container for your media. So that's where you're going to select what event you want to go into. And in the import window here, the media import window, we can either add it to an existing event or create a new event. So in this case, it's going into this IG at Final Cut Pro Help event, but I can click on that and choose one of the other events that happen to be in this current environment of Final Cut that I have. But if you want, you can click on the little circle next to create a new event and then give the event a name. So I'm actually going to create a new event here, and we'll just call it fireworks. Now, an event and how you organize your media, that's a whole different topic that I don't want to go too deep into. But events, you could do everything with an entire movie inside of one event. Or you could have multiple events that are for different purposes. So as an example, if you're going up to maybe a more complex project, maybe you're working on a TV show and you have multiple episodes of that TV show. Let's just say you have 10 episodes in a season. You could have each episode be its own event. And you might have episode 1, 2, 3, etc. going down the road. Or if you're editing a more basic video, maybe it's not too complex, maybe it's like a music video, you might have one event for that entire project. That entire music video could be held in one event. So there's not really a right or wrong way to go about this. It's just how you want to organize things. And if you're newer to this concept of events, start out with just one. I see people dive in and they get really complex really quickly by having multiple events. That may not be the way to go, and I do usually recommend, if you're newer to this, start out with one, and if you need to, you can break it up later. So I'm going to create this new event and call it fireworks, and that's where this clip is going to be imported into. Now, that event is stored inside of a library. Final Cut Pro has libraries, which are over on the left column of your interface. And this event happens to be inside the @Final Cut Pro Help library. So that's what this dropdown is. So the top level is a library, and inside that library is the fireworks event. Now, the actual file is going to be saved somewhere on your computer. It might be on your, say I have an iMac desktop in front of me. It might be on that iMac or a laptop, or you may have an external hard drive connected to your Mac, an external storage device. You can save it there as well. But where does the media actually go when we're importing it? That depends on this files option here, which the default is usually copy to library. And that means wherever your library is actually saved, that's where this file is going to be copied. So in my case, this fireworks clip is being put into an event called fireworks in the library at Final Cut Pro Help. And that library is actually stored in the movies folder on this computer. So if I say copy to library, it's going to copy the fireworks clip that's on the desktop and put it into the library that's inside of my movies folder. And that's actually what I want to do. I'm going to copy it to the library. If I didn't want to do that, I could say leave files in place. And this would just leave it on the desktop. But for now, let's do copy to library. The rest of the options here we're not going to go into for importing. And then I'm just going to hit import all, which is just that one clip, and it's going to copy it to the library. Now, if you're a little bit confused with this, I recommend you import a clip, and then we can try out some things. Because after you've imported the clip, you'll notice at the top left corner, there's our little import button. You can click on that to see our background tasks and see what it's doing. But here we can see, actually it's already imported it. This was just making a backup, so I can close that. But once that clip is imported, you can right click on it or hold the control button and click on the clip. And there's an option here that says reveal in Finder. So if you're still confused about where is this clip actually saved, select it and say reveal in Finder. This is going to open up a Finder window. Just let me drag it over here. And it shows me the clip is selected and it's in a folder called Original Media. Now if I scroll to the left here, I'm in the column view. I can actually see, okay, it's in Original Media. It's in that event folder called Fireworks. And if I go back a little bit further, here it's in the library that's at Final Cut Pro Help. And if I go back even further, I can see that's in the Movies folder. Now just a side tip on here, I usually go up to the View menu, and there's an option here to show the path bar. The path bar is just a macOS Finder feature that puts the path bar right at the bottom here so you can just quickly see it. So without having to scroll through all this, or maybe you're using a different view, you can see still see the entire path right at the bottom here, which I can see, okay, in Macintosh HD, which is my computer, in the users folder, my user, movies, at Final Cut Pro Help, which is the event, which is the library, fireworks, which is the event, original media, mono. There's where that actual clip was imported, and we chose to copy it to the library, so that's why it is showing up there. Okay, so where do the clips go? When you choose copy to library, they're going to go into your library, which is this at Final Cut Pro Help, in my case, library name. So that's one way to do it. Let me go ahead and delete this clip. I'm going to right-click on it, choose Move to Trash. Saying, am I sure I want to do that? Yeah, I'm going to delete it. And I'm going to re-import that same clip. Remember I said copy to library, so it's still on the desktop here. And this time I'm going to say leave that file in place. Leaving files in place means it's not going to copy it. And we're going to see a little bit of a difference here. Now, in this case, I'm going to add it to that fireworks event, and I'm going to say import all. And what you'll notice here is this process is instant. There's no need for it to copy the file. So if you have a much larger or longer file, you don't have to wait around for that to come in. And if I right-click on this file, I'm going to say Reveal in Finder, and you're going to notice something a little bit different. It brought up the window with the desktop. And if I go up to View, I'm going to bring on my path bar again. Notice at the bottom that this movie file is stored on the desktop, and I have iCloud Drive enabled, so it's actually on iCloud, but this desktop is also on my Macintosh HD. So that's where the actual file is stored, and it's right there, which means if I delete this off of the desktop, it's also going to delete it and cause issues inside of Final Cut. So I'm going to do Command Delete to delete this file from the desktop, put it in the trash, and if we go back here into Final Cut, what you'll notice is this clip is not playing. Notice I can't scrub across it. If I create a new project, we're going to call this our fireworks project. And we'll bring this clip down. This is all a preview right now. It's still referencing the one in the trash. Let me go ahead and empty the trash. And yeah, there we go. So now this is what we see. So we get this missing file option because it was referencing that clip that was on the desktop. So that's what, when you choose import, if you're choosing leave file in place, that's what's going to happen. You're going to essentially erase or delete your clip if you do that. So if you're newer to Final Cut, just to summarize, when you import clips, I usually recommend doing the option that says copy to library. It's going to save it to wherever your library is, whether it's called stock or untitled or something else. Try to name your stuff if you can. It's going to go to that location to essentially copy it to there. And then if you do that, in this case, if I did copy to library, I can go ahead and delete that clip off of the desktop because it's been copied. So I'm going to go back and get that clip again. I'm going to put it back on my desktop, which since it's back on the desktop, it actually reconnects it here. Now let me go ahead and move this to the trash, and let's go through that process one more time just to show you what this looks like. So Command I to bring up the import window. Here's my clip. I'm going to do copy to library. It's going to go into the fireworks event, and that's what I recommend, copy to library, and I'll say import all. It's going to import that media, which this is only a 7-second clip, so it does happen almost instantly. But if you have longer clips, it may take a longer time. So use your background tasks window up here to monitor that. You can use Command 9 to bring that up. But make sure your stuff is imported. Once it's imported, you can delete it from wherever it was stored before when you use that copy to library option. So if I delete it from the desktop, I'll go ahead and empty it from the trash as well so that we completely remove it. What you'll notice is this clip is still here. It's playing without a problem. If I right-click on it and choose Reveal in Finder or Shift-Command-R, it goes up and shows me there it is, and it's inside my app Final Cut Pro Help library. And I don't have to worry about losing that or having that clip disappear for any reason. So that was the first kind of common import question that I get is, where do those clips go? Well, it depends on what you select when you are importing those clips by doing Command I to bring up the import window. But most part, it's going to be copied into your library, or if you say leave files in place, then it's wherever you got it from. If it was the desktop, it's going to be there. If it was on an external hard drive, it'll still be there. In some cases, you may see that you can't leave it in place, maybe because it's on a camera. In that case, it will be copied to the library, which will be your source up here. Let me do one last little side note on this. This is a more advanced feature, but if you do select your library, in the inspector, this area over on the right side, there's a modify button. Sorry, not that one. There's an option down for your media and where it goes. So underneath here, we have storage locations and a bunch of other details about the library. So notice there's this modify settings button. If you click modify settings, this shows the storage location for where clips and stuff gets imported. So you can kind of go in here and change some of these advanced options. And if you're newer, I don't recommend doing this. When you import stuff, I do recommend keeping it in the library. But you can manually override this and choose a different location from where to store stuff. This is usually done by people who like to have a lot of control on their content and how it's stored. But honestly, you're just adding a lot more work for yourself if you're newer to this process and working on smaller projects. With that said, there's completely valid reasons why you want to go in and make these changes, but you usually have a more complex workflow and you understand why you're making those changes. If you do have any specific questions about those setups, reach out to me if you're saying, hey, I think I have one of those scenarios where it would be more important for me to manually select those locations. If you want to kind of discuss that a little bit further, just send me an email or message and we can go through those options and see if that's something you should do. I do have other videos on this channel that dive in deeper to this whole importing process. But the next thing I did want to cover is the question of, should I create proxy or optimized media? So you may have noticed when you import, there's an option on the right side here that says transcoding, this little section here, and it says create optimized media, little checkbox there, and there's another option that says create proxy media. So what do these options do? In short, optimized media is media that's going to be usually work better with Final Cut Pro. Allow Final Cut Pro to perform faster and render less, which depending on where your footage is coming and how it's being created, there are some times where optimized media works really well. And that's similar with proxy media. Proxy media is also optimized, a way to make Final Cut perform better. And the difference is proxy media tends to be much smaller in terms of file sizes. So if your content that you're working with is huge files, say it's 4K, 8K, really large files, maybe 360 video, those types of files can cause a computer to run really slow. Especially if you have a lower powered machine or a laptop, it may not be able to edit quickly. You may notice lag when you're working on projects. Well, for the most part, most editing, you don't need your footage to be 8K to edit it. In many cases, you can do 90% of your edit with a lower resolution file, also called a proxy file. So if you transcode it when you're importing into that proxy file, Final Cut can all of a sudden perform much better, less rendering. You'll see less of that spinning wheel, and that would be a reason why you'd want to create proxy media. Optimized media is the same thing. If you have really large files, but you want it to look a little bit better while you're editing it, optimized media can be a great option there. With that said, when you're importing your content, creating optimized or proxy media is actually creating additional files. So it's going to take up more space. If you're stretched thin on your storage of your computer, you might not be able to create optimized and proxy media. So those are things to consider as well. Now, just like importing, you may need to use leave files in place because you have a more complex workflow. It's the same thing with transcoding. There's reasons that you're going to create optimized media and proxy media, and everyone's workflow is going to be a little bit different. So that's kind of, as far as answering the question, should I create proxy or optimized media? In almost every case, I just say it depends on what your workflow actually is. Now, just a couple tips. I very rarely create optimized media, just in my own workflows for things. I almost always create proxy media. I find proxy media and the performance gain that I get when I'm using slower computers or being portable, proxy media works really well. In any of these cases, I always keep the original media. As long as you have the original media, you can always create these down the road. You don't have to create these during import. You can also click on a clip, like this one that we imported here. I can right-click on it, and there's an option to transcode that media, which means is it going to create proxy media or create optimized media. So you can do this stuff at any time. Now, you might notice here the create optimized media is grayed out. That means it is already optimized. There's no reason for it to create another optimized. But you can go here and create proxy, and that'll create that lower resolution file. All right, hopefully that brings a little bit more clarity on it. If you still have questions about like a proxy workflow and how that works, there is another video on this channel that goes into that into more detail. And then the last question I wanted to answer, that's kind of a common one I get about importing, is the question, is there a way to trim parts of the clips to save storage? So if we go back to Command I to the import, I'm going to go back on my desktop here. Actually, let's go, let me get another clip on it because I deleted that one from earlier. We'll just put this original one back on the desktop. So when you're looking at your clips, in some cases, you'll see this little bar at the bottom here, and this actually lets you go in and select portions of the clip. You can go somewhere and press the letter I for an in point, and then go a little bit later and press the letter O for an out point. This is not the case on every clip. This is a QuickTime movie here, and notice it's not letting me select an in and out point. There's no little handles here for me to select that. So it depends on the type of media that you have that you can select in and out points. The question, is there a way to trim parts of the clip? There can be, right? So if your media supports it, you'll be able to do it right here in the import window. And that's a great thing because after you've imported it into Final Cut, without a plugin or some other add-on, there's no options built in where you can trim out media and save storage. So if your media is a QuickTime movie like this one, you can actually open up that movie just from its storage location where it'll bring it into QuickTime, and you can use inside of QuickTime, you can go up to the edit menu, and there's an option to trim that clip, or Command T, and then you can go in and trim just parts of that clip, hit trim, and then save it. It's going to save it as a new clip. So that's how you can create smaller clips or smaller portions instead of importing the entire long thing. I'm going to say delete. I don't want to do that right now. I hope that answers that question. Are there ways to trim it? Yes, if the type of clip is supported, then it'll allow you to do that. Let me see if I have one just so you can see what that looks like in our posts here. These are probably all QuickTime. Yeah, these are all QuickTime movies. Let's see. Yeah, that's fine. You guys, the in and out points will show up right in this little window for where you can do that or make those changes. I'd really like to be able to show you what that looks like. Yeah, let's do. These are all QuickTime movies. Let's see. This one of these should be able to do it. This is Winnie. Yeah, here. Yeah, that's still an MPEG movie. These are all MPEGs, aren't they? Yeah, that's okay. You'll see it if your videos support it. You'll be able to see the in and out points show up in this window, and you can just, as you're skimming across it, hit the letter I. It'll create that in point, and then skim a little bit later, hit the letter O to create the out point, and then it'll be an option to import that. Cool. I don't have a camera connected, and that's usually where you'll get that option, depending on the format. So, yeah, those are the common import questions that I get. And if you have any other specific questions, don't hesitate to put them into the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. And then the last question, at least that I have planned here that I got, was from Instagram earlier today. Someone commented and said, basically, how do you get rid of black borders? So that's a great question. Let me put this clip back to where it was. So it puts it back online here. And actually, this is a bad clip. Let's go into my stock library here because the fireworks one is all really dark footage. So it all looks like black borders. It doesn't look the way you want it to. So I'm going to go ahead and add one of these still images to my project here. And when I do that, notice on the left and the right side of this clip, we get a black bar on the left and the black bar on the right, right? I'm going to hide my inspector and hide my browser. Let's just expand this a little bit. And there we go. So notice I have a gray area on the left here. I have a gray area on the right here. And then this is where my actual viewer is. And let's take this down to 100%. There's a reason I'm doing all this. So notice the gray area now extends all the way around this clip. And then there's this black area on the left and the right, and then the clip. So this area in the middle here is the view of my video. This is where what's gonna show up when I export this out. The black on the left and the right is showing up because this square image that I put in here doesn't fit inside of the, this is a 1080 project, so it's a 1920 by 1080. It doesn't fit in that resolution. So that's why I have those bars on the left and the right. If I want to get rid of them, I can select my image. In the lower left corner of the viewer, there's a trim tool. I can enable that. I get these little circles around the edges of the clip, and I can just click and drag that to increase the size of it until it fits in the frame, which was that kind of 1920 by 1080 frame area there. So that's great. I can just increase the size of it. I can even go into the inspector, which is Command 4, and there's an option to scale. If I take the scale up or down, that's another way to increase the size of it. But if I scale it up, then it fills in those black areas. I think, let me look at the question again. It was doing, yeah, this one just said on from Instagram how to get rid of the black borders. So your borders could be on the top and the bottom. They can be on the left and the right in this case. In any case, just scaling up your video or image can get rid of that border that you're seeing there. Now, this is with just an individual clip. If you want to do it with your entire project, you can do that as well. So let me go in. I'm going to add a couple clips to this project just so you can see. Let's do some normal clips here. We'll do these, get our classic cats in here and add them. So if we have a couple clips added to the project, if you wanted to change the size for all of them at the same time, you can click and drag across all of them to select them, or use the shortcut Command A to select all. And then if you right click on any of them, there's an option here to group them as a compound clip, or you can use Option G as the shortcut. And if I create a compound clip, notice it's basically just like merging them all together to treat them as one clip. If you double click on the compound clip, you can go into it and individually change them. But with them all selected, I can now go into the video inspector and use that scale option to move them all up or shrink them down. Okay, and that'll get rid of those black bars that you were seeing. One side note is just in your viewer here, you might notice this red box shows up. When that shows up, it just means the viewer that you're looking at isn't fitting into the space that's here. If I change the size of the browser, for example, and move it to the right, notice how that red box here changes. And I can actually click on that box and move it left or right to see a different area. But at any time when you're in the viewer here, to get rid of that box, just do Shift Z, like zebra. And that'll zoom this to fit, brought it down in this case to 40%, gets rid of that box, and now we're seeing the entire view there. If I wanted to see it back at where it was before, I'm going to go up to 100%, and notice this little view comes up so that you can move around. If I bring this up even higher, say 400%, notice I'm really zoomed into this cap, but I can go into this box and move it around to see a different area of the clip. So that's what this little viewer is. Again, to get rid of it, just do Shift Z to fit it in. You can also go up to the percentage up here and say fit, and that'll get rid of it as well. All right. In any case, all this stuff I just rearranged. I'm going to use a Command 0 to rearrange my window back to the kind of my interface here, Final Cut interface, back to the default view. So I hope that answers the question, how do you get rid of the black borders? That's probably the easiest way to do it, is to just select your clip. I would recommend doing this on each clip individually, but you can group them as a compound clip if they're all the exact same size, and then you can upscale them just by increasing the scale of your clips. Resolution might go down a little bit, but that's usually okay there. Now, with that being said, you may see black bars and borders in a different scenario, maybe somewhere else, some other type of clip has them, or they're somewhere else. If you export your video clip and you see the borders in the exported clip, that may be the thing where they're just where the screen you're watching it on is just a larger. Like you might have a screen that's taller than 1920 by 1080. It's taller than that 1080 size, but not as wide. So you'd get those black bars there. A great example of this is if you have an iPad or an iPhone. 1920 by 1080 usually does not fit the entire screen of an iPad. iPads have more of a square display in most cases, so that's where you'll see those black bars. And that's nothing you're doing wrong. That's just the size of video that you've selected as your project, which most common right now is probably 1920 by 1080 or a 4K project. Those resolutions, very standard sizes, just don't fit on there. If you look at Instagram, if you're publishing videos onto Instagram, Instagram usually is a square post for photos, but you can post videos that are that 16 by 9 aspect ratio, where they're like a widescreen video, or you can create a project that's 1080 by 1080, and you'll be able to post a square video on there. It all depends on where these projects are going. So if you have borders and you maybe have a more complex setup and reasons those borders are showing up, again, you can always message me and we'll go through that manually there. But in most cases, if you see those borders in your actual project like we did with this clip, just because this is a square image that's taller than it is wide, because the project is actually wider, so it just doesn't have that. But with the clip selected, we can either stretch it by just dragging the left and the right transform controls there, which show up from the lower left corner button, the transform tool, or you can use one of the corners to scale it up. And if you have trouble grabbing it, go up to your window percent here, maybe make it 50% or lower. Grab that corner, you can scale it up, or you can use the inspector, use the scale to adjust it there. Yeah, that should answer it. I guess one last tip here, just while we're in the inspector. This is getting a little bit more advanced as far as how these things are set up. But if you scroll down to the bottom here, there's an option here that says Spatial Conform. This conform option, if you don't see it just on the right side, click the show button. But this has what type do you want it to conform to? And this just means your image that you see here or video, how does it adjust itself automatically when you put that clip in? If you choose fit, it does what it did here, where it fits the entire clip or image in so that you can see the entire thing. Right now, if I'm an audience member or a viewer of your video, I'm going to see the entire clip, but I'm going to see the black bars on there. We could change this to fill, which means the clip's going to be upscaled or adjusted to fill the frame. So fit means show me all of the content or your clip, and fill means don't show any black. Fill the entire frame. Don't show any empty space in the frame compared to whatever the clip is selected. Which right now our viewer there, because we don't have anything, is going to be black. Excuse me. All right. So that is our spatial conform. None means it's just not going to do anything with the conforming type. Woo! All right. Thanks for bearing with me on my whatever that little air bubble was that's in my throat there. So, I hope that answered your question there. Again, if you have your own questions that you want answered, don't hesitate to jump on Instagram, here in the live chat if you're watching it live, or commenting on any of the content that we have, whether it be a video, an Instagram post, Facebook, all those places, Twitter. You can tweet at me at Final Cut Pro Help, and be happy to answer your questions. In most cases, we'll jump into a direct message and go through the problem that you have to get it answered. In some cases, if it works out really well, like that question got asked, I think about an hour ago on Instagram, if I'm planning to go live, we'll just jump on live, get these things answered for you. If not, we'll go ahead and get them answered through the social media. I do also offer one-on-one training for a cost. All this other stuff kind of I do just for free, just to get you guys up and running. But if you do want to dive into a more detailed project, or you have more questions that maybe need that one-on-one time, I know these creative types of projects can get really complex. Don't hesitate, reach out, let me know about it, and we'll get you some one-on-one time created and set up there. With all of that being said, make sure you do subscribe to the channel here and follow at Final Cut Pro Help on Instagram and all those social medias. But especially Instagram, because we are going to be going through at least 64 shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts inside of Final Cut. There's hundreds of shortcuts that are in here, but we're going to find out and go through the most popular ones, the ones you think are the most powerful that get your job done. Learning keyboard shortcuts is huge. Even if you don't use the keyboard shortcut, being able to understand what the shortcut does and what that command is can be very powerful. There's many people who have learned editing just by learning various shortcuts. So we're going to get that all kind of laid out. We did it last year with the 2019 shortcut of the year, but we are going to go even further this year and find the 2020 shortcut of the year. But you can go to anawesomeguide.com to follow along. We're going to have the live bracket up there. Bookmark that bracket. You can open it up, save it, print it out, whatever you want to do. But then I'll show you a list of all the shortcuts. Take a look at the 2019 bracket from last year that we did. And if there's shortcuts on there that you're like, I don't know what this does, I want to learn more about it, you can definitely learn more about those shortcuts. And if you don't know, on anawesomeguide.com, you'll see a link there to see the top 25 shortcuts. We've actually gone into more detail. You can get a free course on there that where we have videos on what those shortcuts are and kind of go into a little bit more detail. But we're going to be live multiple times the rest of this month going over those shortcuts, demoing them, and it all kicks off tomorrow with some voting. So if you're not following on Instagram, make sure to follow there. The stories are going to get lit up with all kinds of fun things going on. So thank you for those that tuned in live, or if you're watching this on a replay, thank you as well. And we'll be back very shortly with some more live streaming. Make sure to ask those questions. If you have them, don't hesitate.